As a park ranger, I've learned that silence in the woods isn't peace. It's a warning. I'm Jones, and I've seen what happens when the forest stops treating you like a guest and starts seeing you as prey. I'm talking about the Wendigo, a hunger that never ends, using the voices of those you love to lure you into the dark. Welcome back, little ravens. In video today, 4 true horror stories from the deep woods. If you hear your name, don't answer. You aren't alone. My name is Thomas. I spent 12 years as a park ranger in the Pacific Northwest, a place where the trees are so tall they seem to swallow the sky. You get used to the isolation, the cold coffee, and the way the fog clings to your skin like a wet burial shroud. But you never get used to the feeling of being hunted. It was late October, during a brutal cold snap. I was manning the North Station, miles from any cell service or paved roads. My job was simple: monitor the trails and wait for the winter cruise. But the forest was different that night. It was silent and dead, heavy silence that makes your ears ring. In the national parks, we call it the quiet. It is when every bird and insect stops moving, because something at the top of the food chain just entered the area. Around 2 a.m., a scratching sound started against the wooden slats of my cabin. It wasn't the clumsy scrape of a bear. It was rhythmic, sharp, like long, bone-thin fingers testing the strength of the cedar. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, my heart already hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then, the radio crackled. Through the static, a voice came through. It was Sarah, a fellow ranger from the East Station. "Thomas, are you there? I'm lost. I'm near the old creek. Please." It's so cold. My blood turned to ice. Sarah had died in a climbing accident 3 years ago. I was the one who found her body. I felt a surge of grief, but it was instantly strangled by a primal, true horror. I knew what was out there. The legends speak of a hunger that never dies, a creature that wears the voices of the departed like a trophy. The Wendigo. I didn't answer. I remembered the old protocol. If the forest speaks with a voice you know, stay inside. Do not look out. "Thomas, why won't you help me?" The voice was closer now, coming from just outside the thin cabin door. It sounded exactly like her, the same soft rasp, the same way she laughed. But then, the pitch shifted. It became too high, too mechanical, echoing like it was being played through a broken speaker. I peered through the small, frosted window. My flashlight beam cut through the mist and landed on a figure standing 20 feet away. It was tall, nearly 10 feet, and impossibly gaunt. Its skin was the color of a drowned man, stretched tight over a frame of jagged bone. It didn't have a face, just a lipless mouth and sunken holes where eyes should be. It wasn't breathing. It was just vibrating. Suddenly, the creature leaned its head back and let out a sound that shattered my soul. It wasn't a roar. It was my own voice, screaming for help, played back to me with terrifying precision. It began to run. Not on 2 legs, but a twitchy, 4-legged gallop that defied physics. It slammed against the cabin, the entire structure groaning under the impact. I retreated to the center of the room, clutching my axe, my breath coming in jagged gasps. I could feel the tachycardia vibrating in my throat. The scratching stopped. For 10 minutes, there was nothing. Then, a soft thud came from the roof. The ceiling boards flexed downward. A single gray, skeletal finger poked through a gap in the wood, reaching, searching. I sat there until the sun bled over the horizon. When the light finally hit the cabin, the pressure vanished. I stepped outside, my legs shaking. On the frosted glass of my window, there was a single handprint. The fingers were 14 inches long, and the glass was cracked in the shape of a star. I resigned that day, because once the woods know your name, they never stop calling it. What makes Thomas's account so disturbing is the psychological cruelty of the Wendigo. It doesn't just want to eat. It wants to hollow you out emotionally, before the kill. By using the voice of a deceased friend, the entity bypasses our logical defenses and strikes directly at our trauma. In the world of park ranger horror, this is the ultimate uncanny valley moment where a familiar sound becomes a weapon. The physical evidence, the cracked glass, and the handprint proves this wasn't highway hypnosis or isolation-induced psychosis. It was a physical encounter with a predator that understands human weakness. If you ever find yourself in the deep woods and hear a loved one calling from a place they couldn't possibly be, run. Don't look back. The forest has a long memory, and it's always hungry. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what you thought. My name's David, and I don't go into the deep woods anymore. Not even during the day. I was a park ranger for 7 years, and I loved the silence until that silence started talking back to me. This happened in a remote section of a northern national park, a place so dense with ancient pines that the ground hasn't seen direct sunlight in decades. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came in. A young hiker had gone missing near the Devil's Throat Pass. I headed out alone, following the standard search and rescue protocol. The air was unnervingly still, the kind of cold that feels like it's trying to bite through your uniform. About 3 miles into the thicket, the smell hit me. It wasn't the metallic scent of a fresh kill or the musk of a bear. It was the smell of old, stagnant water and rotting cedar, a scent I now know is the signature of a Wendigo. As I reached a clearing, I heard a cry. "Help! Down here! I've broken my leg." It was a young man's voice, sharp and frantic. I hurried toward the sound, but then I stopped dead. The voice was coming from the top of a 60-foot pine tree. I looked up, and my heart began that familiar, terrifying tachycardia. There, perched on a branch that should have snapped under the weight of a squirrel, was a figure. It was impossibly tall and gaunt, its limbs long and jagged like broken branches. It wasn't the hiker. It was a pale, skeletal entity with skin like gray parchment. It leaned its head back and repeated the words, "Help! Down here! I've broken my leg." But this time, its jaw didn't move. The sound came from its chest, a vibrating, hollow echo that made my skin crawl. This was the uncanny valley in its most lethal form. The creature was rehearsing the hiker's last moments to lure me closer. I realized then that I wasn't the rescuer. I was the next course on the menu. I slowly backed away, my hand trembling on my bear spray, knowing it would be useless against something this ancient. Suddenly, the creature dropped. It didn't fall. It descended with a twitchy, spider-like grace, its long fingers gripping the bark. It hit the forest floor without a sound. It stood nearly 11 feet tall, its sunken, glowing eyes locked onto mine. It began to mimic my own breathing, loud, panicked gasps syncing its rhythm to my terror. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the hiker. I knew he was already part of the forest now. I could hear the thing behind me. It wasn't running like a person. It was a series of rapid, heavy thuds, followed by the sound of my own voice laughing behind me. "David, wait for us, David," it whispered, using my mother's voice. I reached my truck just as the sun dipped below the horizon. I slammed the door and locked it, my chest heaving. When I looked in the side mirror, I saw it standing at the edge of the tree line. It didn't attack the truck. It just raised a long skeletal hand and waved, a perfect mocking imitation of a human goodbye. When I returned with the team the next morning, we found the hiker's jacket. It was folded neatly on a stump, but the inside was lined with a layer of thin gray frost. There were no footprints, just the lingering smell of rot and the feeling that we were being watched by something that hadn't eaten in 100 years. He wasn't found until the day I quit my job. I didn't want to go through that again. I don't know if I'd be able to escape next time, and I know he's there waiting for me. What David experienced is perhaps the most terrifying trait of the Wendigo, its ability to weaponize our empathy. By mimicking a hiker in distress or a family member, the creature forces us to lower our guard. In the lore of true horror, this is a predatory tactic designed to bypass our survival instincts. Notice the physical evidence. Again, the jacket lined with frost. In many park ranger horror accounts, extreme cold follows these entities, a physical manifestation of the winter psychosis they represent. It wasn't a hallucination brought on by the thin air. It was a physical predator using high-level psychological warfare. If you're ever in the woods and hear a voice that sounds just a bit too perfect, or a cry for help coming from the treetops, don't be a hero. Just keep moving until you hit the pavement. Because some things in the forest aren't looking for help, they're looking for a host. Comment what you thought and what you would do in this situation. Leave a like, and if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. My name is Sarah, and I spent 5 years as a park ranger stationed in a lookout tower. Most people think it's a dream job watching sunsets and reading books. But when you're 30 feet above the ground, surrounded by nothing but miles of pine and shadows, the isolation starts to play tricks on your mind. Or at least, that's what I tried to tell myself. It was a Thursday in late November, the kind of day where the sky is the color of a bruised lung. A massive storm was rolling in, and the wind was howling through the tower supports. Around 6 p.m., I decided to head down to my truck to grab some extra supplies before the snow got too deep. I climbed down the wooden stairs, counting each step like I always did. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 40. I reached the bottom, but I didn't hit the forest floor. I hit a landing. I looked up, and I was back at the top of the tower, standing right outside my cabin door. I froze. I thought I was just exhausted. Highway hypnosis. But on a staircase, I figured. I took a deep breath, gripped the railing, and started down again. I moved faster this time, my boots thudding against the wood. 40 steps later, I slammed into the cabin door at the top. Again, panic began to rise in my throat, a sharp, cold tachycardia that made my vision blur. I wasn't just tired, I was trapped. I looked out over the railing, and the forest below looked wrong. The trees were gray, and they weren't swaying with the wind. They were vibrating, twitching in a rhythmic, mechanical way. Then, the smell hit me. It was that stagnant, rotting scent, the smell of a Wendigo. I looked down the stairs one more time. Standing on the landing 10 steps below me was a figure. It was impossibly thin. Its skin stretched so tight over its ribs that it looked like it would snap. It wore the shredded remains of a ranger's uniform, but its head was crowned with massive, jagged antlers. It didn't have eyes, just deep, hollow pits that seemed to suck the light out of the air. It looked up at me and spoke, but it didn't use its own voice. It used mine. 1, 2, 3, 40, it whispered, mocking the way I counted the steps. I retreated into the cabin and locked the door, my hands shaking so hard I could barely slide the bolt. The creature began to circle the tower. I could hear its claws clicking against the wood. Each time it completed a circle, the room inside the cabin changed. My bed would move to the other side. My radio would disappear and then reappear on the floor. It was a time slip, a glitch in the reality of the national park. The creature started to climb. I could hear the wood groaning under its weight. It reached the window and pressed its pale, lipless face against the glass. It began to hum a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. It was trying to hollow me out, to make me give up and open the door. I grabbed my flare gun, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. "Leave me alone," I screamed. The creature stopped humming. It tilted its head and replied in a distorted, metallic version of my own scream. I realized then that the loop wouldn't end until the sun came up. I sat in the corner of the room, clutching my knees, watching the door handle jiggle for 6 straight hours. Every time the creature turned the knob, I felt a wave of freezing cold air, and the smell of rot filled the room. When the first ray of dawn finally touched the trees, the vibration of the forest stopped. I heard a heavy thud, like a large body hitting the ground. I ran to the window. The stairs were back to normal. The forest floor was visible again. I ran to my truck and didn't stop driving until I saw the city lights. When I got home, I found a small gray tuft of hair caught in the zipper of my jacket. It wasn't human, and it smelled like a grave. I quit my job. I never went back to a forest. I avoid it at all costs, and if I need to travel and pass through forested areas, I'm always accompanied. That feeling of helplessness, it won't go away. That's what a Wendigo does. Sarah's experience is a terrifying example of a time slip or spatial distortion, a phenomenon often reported in the deepest parts of our national parks. The Wendigo doesn't just hunt your body, it hunts your perception of reality. By trapping Sarah in an infinite loop, it waited for her mind to break from the isolation and terror. This wasn't just a trick of the light or fatigue. The physical evidence, the hair in the zipper, and the shifting furniture proves that some places in the world have memory or act as a living trap. It is a reminder that our technology and structures are no protection against an entity that can bend time itself. What would you do if you were trapped in a loop with something watching you from the shadows? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to join our community of night travelers. My name is Leo. For most people, a park ranger patrol truck is a symbol of safety, a beacon of authority in the wild. For me, it's a metal box that nearly became my coffin. What happened that November night changed how I look at the darkness between the trees. I don't just see shadows anymore. I see teeth. It was nearly 4 a.m. I was doing my final sweep on a gravel road that snakes through the heart of the forest. The truck's heater was on full blast, but I still felt a chill that seemed to seep out of my own bones. The radio was silent, emitting only a low static hiss that sounded like distant, rhythmic whispering. I was driving slowly, about 15 miles per hour, when the truck's backup sensors started to beep. I slammed on the brakes. I looked out the back window, but there was nothing. The road was deserted. I checked the side mirrors, just dust and motionless pines. I started to accelerate again, but the sensor went off instantly, this time with a solid, piercing scream, as if something was leaning directly against the rear bumper. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, something rose out of the darkness of the truck bed. It was a pale creature, with long knotted limbs that looked like scorched branches. It had no eyes, only dark, sunken pits that seemed to overflow with an infinite sadness and an even deeper hunger. The Wendigo. It was crouched in the back of my truck, its claws dug deep into the metal. Panic triggered a tachycardia so violent, I could feel my neck pulsing. I floored the gas. The engine roared, but the truck felt heavy, as if I were towing a ton of lead. I glanced to my left and saw a blur keeping pace with the vehicle. The creature had leapt from the truck bed and was now sprinting alongside my window. It didn't run like an animal. It moved in spasms, its bones cracking audibly over the sound of the engine. The smell of rotting meat and dry ice flooded the cabin through the air vents. "Leo, why are you running?" the creature asked. But it wasn't its voice. It was the voice of my younger sister, whom I hadn't seen in years. The sweetness of that voice, contrasted with that skeletal, rotting body, was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. It was a nightmare come to life, the moment where love is twisted into a weapon. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes locked on the road, praying the tires wouldn't blow on the gravel. The creature began to claw at the side window, its long gray fingers leaving deep gouges in the glass. It began to mimic my own panicked breathing, mocking my fear. I swerved the truck, trying to hit it, but it leapt into the canopy of the trees with impossible agility. I drove until I hit the main gates, my face drenched in cold sweat. When the sun came up, I inspected the truck. There were deep claw marks in the metal of the bed, tearing through the original park ranger paint. But what made me resign that very day was what I found on the passenger seat. A single snowflake that never melted, and a small lock of my sister's hair. Leo's story shows us that the Wendigo isn't just a physical monster, it's a psychological predator. It uses the truck's own technology, the proximity sensors, to announce its presence and toy with the victim as sanity. In the world of true horror, this is the ultimate fear. When your place of work, your sanctuary, is violated by something ancient. The physical evidence, the frost that doesn't melt, is the signature of an entity that carries eternal winter within its soul. This wasn't highway hypnosis or exhaustion. It was a hunt. If you ever work night patrols or travel alone through wilderness areas, trust your gut. If your car's sensors scream at an empty road, do not stop to look. Sometimes what's behind you is already inside. Have you ever felt like something was following you on a deserted road? What would you do if you heard a loved one's voice coming from the shadows of the forest? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe to join our community and like this video so that YouTube will recommend it. The forests of our national parks guard secrets that time and silence try to hide. For these park rangers, the uniform wasn't a shield, but a target. The Wendigo isn't just a paper legend. It is a hunger that distorts reality, steals the voices of those we love, and turns isolation into a labyrinth with no escape. These 4 true horror stories serve as a warning. Nature isn't just a backdrop, it is a living entity. And sometimes it's hungry. If you choose to venture into the unknown, remember that your senses can deceive you, but your survival instinct never fails. If the air turns too cold and the silence becomes absolute, don't wait to see what comes next. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the shadows. If these accounts gave you chills, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next plunges into true horror. Turn on the bell icon to be the first to know when the darkness returns. And now, I leave you with one question. If you were alone in a lookout tower and heard the voice of someone long gone calling your name out there in the storm, would you have the courage to ignore it? Or would your doubt be the end of you? Share your answer or your own story in the comments below. Until next time, and keep your eyes wide open, because you are never truly alone. Bye-bye, little ravens.